I'm Brian Wilson. I'm a solo indie developer. This is my first title called Where the Bees Make Honey. So it started as my first game ever, and over the past 2 years it's really transformed into a commercial title. So Where the Bees Make Honey tells a story about reflecting on different moments of when you were young, but viewed from the perspective of from when you were an adult. So that being said, there are moments playable when you were young, and those range from puzzle levels where different elements of the world change when you rotate the worlds, or you're driving an RC car through the house, you're hitting jumps off your backyard. But also with the fact that you're viewing it from the perspective as an adult, you play that in the first person. So kind of you have a realization that being an adult isn't what it's cracked up to be while you're working at your day job in the office. So a lot of this just comes firsthand, and I think everyone can relate to it because everyone has had a childhood.
What made you want to work in games as a medium? What do you think is unique about that you think really adds something to this game?
Well, I think that the games are the culmination of art, sound, psychology, story, all into an interactive, playable thing. So me with a background in photography and music, being able to create something interactive that someone else could play, that's so personal to me. There's not much like that.
Do you think your background in art, and I'd love to hear a little more about it, like how you got that in terms of schooling or where you went, or like what actually got you into this, and how did that evolve into working in games? Because clearly you've got like a passion for that medium. Just kind of want to hear a little more about how you got there.
Yeah, so I went into games with years of photography experience and just loving just motion pictures, just something that's how I could express myself. Because with a camera, you can take 1,000 pictures and just see it and just see instant feedback. So when I first started in games, I didn't know if I was going to be able to translate that. It wasn't very obvious at first. It was took a lot of work to finally get to the ability to where I'm realizing that in games there's a digital camera. There's a camera in engine, I should say, and it functions the same way the camera I physically have does. So yeah, to me when I saw that was really the difference maker, that what I felt comfortable within games.
In other interviews you've done with like GameSpot and with Utomic, one of the questions that comes up frequently is about inspiration.
Yeah.
So given that this is your interview and we're editing it for content, this is kind of your time to authoritatively say, as the developer, these were my inspirations, this is where I drew from, this is what goes into the game.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell me a little bit about that? What inspired you to make the game? What were some of the other indie games or film or paintings or whatever that made you think that inspired the way you've done Where the Bees Make Honey so far?
Yeah, Where the Bees Make Honey was definitely inspired by games first, because like I said, when starting I had no idea what I was even capable of. So at first it was really just having something playable. So those games were, obviously Fez or Captain Toad's Treasure Hacker, Monument Valley, but that was really subconsciously. I think that's just when someone's favorite games are Mario 3, Zelda, Metroid. Later on, those inspirations will bleed into what they do, even if they're not thinking about it. So I think that's obvious, but that was only because that's the only thing I knew, and that was without knowing the capabilities of photography and film and music within games. But yeah, like I said, now with that capability, just the inspiration of movies and of paintings. There's a painter named Cinta Vidal who basically just the idea that people can be on the same kind of cube, like you can kind of say that with like just it being isometric. Kind of just saw that like if you turn it this way, it's a whole different thing.
That bleeds into a bit about the conversation about perspective that we've had a million times before. Kind of a theme, but also a mechanic in the game is perspective.
Yeah.
So we talk about, this recurs throughout the game. How you look at life changes how you perceive it, how you look at your work situation, but also literally how you look at the levels as the camera is manipulated.
Right.
What were your inspirations in that regard, and what are you trying to tell the player there? What's the message? And I mean, you don't have to give away the baby with the bathwater, but like, what do you want players to feel with that perspective message?
Well, I think it's just the instant surprise that when you rotate the puzzle levels, that different elements within those worlds also change. So with that, it was kind of being inspired by living in the same small town for a lot of my adult life, but realizing that everything within my hometown stayed the same, but I changed, as in each time I went back as I got older, I was able to view it from a different perspective and be able to appreciate it, for what it's worth. So within the game, it's, some things may not be so clear until you look at it from a different way, and then all of a sudden it's there. So it's a little deeper, but I think that really, that just came from, what if I can make this happen? And what that's gonna allow me to give this idea to a player instantly.
So Where the Bees Make Honey is a shorter game. You've said to me in the past that this is like maybe a 2-hour experience. It's something that you kind of can get through in a sitting if you wanted to. That's an interesting area to be in, right? Because of course there's a push right now in the games industry to be longer, more content, more this, more that. Other kind of more artistic game producers like David Cage have said publicly, don't play my games twice. Because they want you to experience it and just kind of get what you get out of it and never do it again.
Right.
And what do you think about that? And what do you think about making a shorter game, like a compact experience for a lower price that you just want people to experience one time? What do you hope to get out of that? And do you think that'll be successful and you can be successful in that area?
Yeah, I do think you can be successful in that area because games like that, like you said, you can play in a sitting and you remember it almost instantly, within a few days. And that game doesn't become a job, and it's that experience. That's it. It ends, and you can take that with you, whether you like it or not. So with my game, I want each level to have something that will just kind of wow you. Maybe not. It's not the best thing you've ever seen, but it gives you some sort of feeling that can only be achieved through a game.
At conferences, people have compared Where the Bees Make Honey to an art installation, to something you might see in an art museum, to like clay prints, to film. Are you comfortable with that comparison? Is that something that you think feels natural for you? Because you mentioned before that you do use photographic inspirations in how you frame the camera, but there's certainly something more game-like to a game that isn't captured in a film. So I just maybe want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think that comes from being, I think, a solo developer. Because since, like I said, there are so many different aspects to a game that I was able to wholeheartedly put in what I love. So with those other aspects, or I should say with the aspects that I really can express myself, that's what comes natural. So I think that's really how the game started to form. So a lot of that is with just that idea of being a kid and being in a kid's world, but also just the fact that I just love, I can frame it in a way with a camera that I now know as an adult. So it's kind of just like taking things I've learned that I can do now, but also applying it to maybe when I was young. So.
You mentioned being a solo developer, and I think that's really integral to what you've got here, right? Because if you actually look at, and this is meant as a compliment, if you look at Where the Bees Make Honey, I mean, it's a bit schizophrenic, right? Like there's a whole lot of very different mechanics, very different settings, very different vignettes. I mean, there's this different camera perspectives. It feels a bit like kind of a what do they call a beautiful corpse in art, where it's a bunch of things kind of put together in the most strange way. And I think you're quite right that does come out of being a solo developer. But I'd like to hear kind of like your ups and downs. Certainly when you're working as a solo dev, you get absolute authorial control over what you're making. But it obviously comes with its own trade-offs of having to do absolutely everything. So Kickstarter, obviously while we're doing one of these interviews, a lot of that is helping you financially, helping you get the resources you need to actually shove it out the door. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how you've found success being a solo developer, but also a little bit about how that, like the difficulties that's presented you.
Yeah, I think the most satisfying part is everything I put into the game is from me, but also from the help of other developers in a sense of just things they've made that I can apply to my game. But you don't need the largest budget and largest team to make something beautiful. So with that, it's what can I do that's personal, and how can I make it relate to other people? So with that, you're right, I having complete control and freedom is amazing, but also I really miss out on having someone to help in aspects I'm not super capable in. So, but I think that just makes it more honest. I think that's the thing about indie games that I think I love most, is how just completely rough around the edges and raw they can be, because they don't have that multi-million-dollar budget.
One thing that's come up at conferences a few times is people have said that it's like a dream, like a daydream or a dream state, and that dream word comes up a lot. Do you think that's a fair assessment of what you're trying to portray to people, or?
Yeah, I think it's with my main character, Sunny, kind of reflects, and that's a key word, reflects on these times when she was young. So those different playable pieces it's just nostalgia, and everyone's had it, and everyone can relate to just toys coming to life, and just, back when a stick was like a sword or a gun, and playing dress up meant whatever costume you were wearing changed your surroundings, and your backyard was ultimately a forest, and it's just that imagination factor.
Talk to me, kind of last but not least here, I'm interested to hear at the end of this, like what you want people to take away. Like what do you think players or people experiencing the game generally will take away from the experience?
Oh God.
What would you like people to take away from the experience?
I haven't.
This need not be a canvas.
I gotta think about it.
I'm just kind of interested.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think it's really gonna allow people to reflect on their own childhoods, and everyone's had a different one. So I think that's what's most interesting is I'm really going to be able to have people relate to it, even though it wasn't theirs, and whether that be coming out of the game with reflection and appreciation for where they grew up, or their family, or siblings, and just kind of the idea that imagination and creation is so important no matter how old you are.
I'm gonna give you a kind of a left hook here, because I think it's important for the kind of audience we're speaking to. You mentioned liminality a lot, which is which is a film and kind of art theory. So, if we have a few minutes to dive into art theory here, what do you think that particular kind of piece is important to this game, and how does that apply to the kind of sort of vision you've created for the game?
Yeah, so the game was actually codenamed Liminal at first, before I even had a title. So within the rites of passage, I kind of want to transform these 3 acts throughout the game. So that's just kind of coming to terms with things, and then maybe you're in the process of change, and then at last you finally made that transformation and have gone on to a new stage of life.